You guys know how for the longest time Riot got like Omega flamed because their developers are like, everyone's saying the developers are in silver. How are they going to balance the game? And I think it was a bit toxic, but I do think it's good if the people who are in charge of the game are good, because how are you supposed to know what the most optimal strat of playing the game is unless you're good?
Yeah.
You have to like play the game and like actually know or have a good read on like what is going to be the most OP meta strat, and then obviously you're in charge of balancing that to make it fun. So
Yeah,
I think it's important.
I actually saw a thread from some like game developers, some of them at Riot, about this recently, where it was talking about like the original thread was someone saying like she thinks that more game devs should actually have to play the game. Like they should just have days that are set aside for like the whole company to just play the game, because if you only play like, one game a day or like, some random play test or like you do an ARAM, like I wouldn't want that person working on League of Legends, well, at least any gameplay side of it. Because you're not really getting a good read of how the game is played if you don't play it.
Yeah, you only can think about the theoreticals of
I think there's like a good balance to it that isn't just one-sided or the other. Like you have to play the game all the time to actually be able to balance it.
Yeah.
And like obviously with the skill thing too, I think having literally everyone that's balancing it be good as fuck at the game, like I think that's obviously super unreasonable.
That's true. Then you're gonna have a really skewed. I think you definitely want some people who are actually good. And you guys know like the new guy.
You might want people that are
Blizzard?
actually bad too, honestly.
What?
I mean, yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah.
Just to get a
shit, big
different
fight.
side of opinion is all.
I'm actually on the opposite side
Perfect.
of you, Peter, as far as win rates go, because I think when you look at win rates for all league players, I actually think the simple champs should be the ones that have the higher win rate. Champs like Jinx, like, champs that have easy team fight win conditions, I think should be the champs with the highest win rate in league. Just because you have to take into account it's like all players playing, and I think just the easier a champ is, like the more games it's going to win on average.
But if
And
you
I
take
don't-
into account all players playing, then you're going to have filled players playing simple champions and only one tricks playing Riven and Jax. And those one tricks are going to have a high win rate. So using win rates to justify nerfing those champs is fucked up.
Yeah, but like I don't think it's only one tricks. Like you would, I mean, my first thing on it is I think balancing champions based off win rate in general is like a big mistake. I don't know why Riot cares so much about that. I think it's just one of those things where it's like,
The hell?
easy to justify their decisions. Is your stream frozen?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So, like I think it's just okay. I guess the stream's fucked. But I think it's just they do it because it's easy to like justify what they're doing, to like not have people get super upset when they make changes. But I don't think win rate is actually a good metric for how strong
That's
a champion
flawed.
is. For that reason, like I don't think a champ with the highest win rate necessarily means it's the best champion. I think it just means it's
I think
like
win
the
rate
most
it should be
straightforward.
either. I think the only thing that matters to me is that champions with low skill, like extremely high reward but low skill input, should not have extremely high win rates. Great example. Nocturne was highest win rate in top jungle and mid. That champ is fucking brain dead to play. It feels horrible to play against. The guy can be a literal bot with one hand and do his full combo on you and you just die. I hate when the meta is filled with high win rate champions that take no skill and are super face roll, because I feel like there's very little skill expression involved in that stuff. If I'm getting outplayed by a high win rate like Riven or a high win rate Katarina, I feel like the guy at least had to fucking work for it. So that's why I think win rates should be skewed to higher skilled champions, because generally the more skilled players are going to play those champions. And if you are, not so comfortable mechanically in the game, you're going to tend to play stuff like Nocturne and do a little bit worse.
But the thing is, win rate factors in like all people who play champs, and even though it's like there's going to be more mains playing those champs, it also factors in the people who are first timing them, in which case it's almost always going to be losses, right?
That is true. I just think that that's like generally the outlier if we're talking about ranked win rates. I think the bread and butter is junglers face rolling, playing Udyr, Xin Zhao, and Hecarim every single game with no skill expression. I would so much rather those champs just be, middling win rate. I'm not saying they should be like 45. I'm just saying they should be like middle. And at the top, I would like to see stuff like Lee Sin. I would like to see stuff like, I don't know, Talia, because
Perfect.
it just makes for a more interesting game.
Yeah, I mean, what it sounds like though is, to me, it feels like you're equating win rate to champion strength, which my point is I don't think win rate actually means champion strength. Like I don't think win rate's a good metric for how good a champion is. Because I agree with you that like those should be the strongest champs, but I just don't think those champs will have the highest win rates because they're the hardest champs.
15.
That is true.
and
I think win
counting.
rate equates to champion strength in solo queue. That's how I've always seen it. But I see what you're saying, because
I don't
I guess
necessarily think so, because you need a big sample size too. Like, there could be champs that aren't played that often but have a higher win rate. But it's like, the more they play in that role, it's like, okay, well, they're not actually that broken.
Yeah, I think champs that are like very strong but have like a really clear weakness should probably be the champs with the highest win rate. Like, I think Jinx is like the perfect example of a champ who, in my mind, should almost always have a really high solo queue win rate. Just because it's like Jinx isn't super unfair to play against, right? But she can do like insane shit in team fights and pop off. And she's not like that hard to play. You know, she doesn't have like a ton of mechanical shit. You can just kind of take out your rocket launcher and right click people down. As a skill floor level, which is honestly what win rates come down to most of the time because you are factoring in so many games.
Yeah, I just think looking at the actual number of win rate isn't the right way for sure.
okay, the win rate thing is honestly so subjective, because we're thinking about like how low is the shittiest players going to skew it down, and how insanely smurf are the best players going to skew it highly. I think like instead of win rate, what we're actually probably want is
I mean, it's just strength of champ, I think, would be
yeah,
the most obvious. It's like,
we want
but
to nail
that-
down
that's
the
a
strength
high
of
skill
champ
champ,
versus
how
the skill
strong
required
is
to
the
play
champ?
Yeah, that was the whole discussion that I was saying is like, to me, I don't think win rate is a good metric for how strong a champ is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think
mean, you
the
also
fact
said that
Riot
you
gets
wanted
such
the
a-
simplest champs to be the highest win rate.
Yeah, because they're the simplest. And I think on average those will win more than the hard shit because, you know, when you're playing Malphite, you can't really fuck him up that badly. Right? Like, if two average players are playing against each other, like Malphite versus Riven or something, like, I think their Malphite will win more often because his win condition is just pressing his buttons and hoping the Riven isn't fucking Viper.
That
but that's
would
not to say
be
Riven
that would be
can't win.
assuming that Malphite and Riven are the same strength of champion. So
I don't think it's as black as white as we're trying to make it. Like,
yeah, it's not
not
black and white.
one or
But
the other.
I think when you play Malphite versus Riven, if it's a normal game where Malphite is just an okay pick and not a god tier pick, Riven should win more often, because Malphite is the player who's playing Malphite is sacrificing consistency. Sorry, he's gaining consistency because Malphite is so easy to play and way less easy to fuck up on than Riven, for champion strength.
Yeah.
10 down.
But like how that factors into win rate is really hard to talk about, because then you're like, there's so many variables that go into win rate.
Yeah, I just think it's like the harder a champ is to play, I see it as more mistakes that you can make, right?
yeah.
And most players who aren't at the very highest level are going to make a lot of fucking mistakes
Yeah.
at every opportunity, right? It's why like Yasuo, Azir, Akali, Ryze type champs are usually very low win rate, despite being really good and competitive. Because it's a huge difference when you have like a super skilled player on the champ versus, you know, your average league player.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what was
Which is why I think win rate wise, the easier ones should have a higher win rate, because if they didn't, then the game would be really weird.
So that's your whole point.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just talking like win rate in
Yeah.
general. I think it's just like not a good metric to balance the game off of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
I agree with that.
for sure.
It's pretty bad.
Makes sense.
It's,
What was the original?
I think it all comes back for me. It all comes back down to like the statement of the most fun way to play the game. The most optimal way to play in the game should be also the most fun. And when the meta is boiled down to playing high win percentage face roll champions and just kind of dumbing down the game mechanically, I think if that's the most optimal way of playing the game, it's the least fun. I have the least fun playing against and watching when it's tank top, mage mid, hyper scaling 80 carry bottom, support with like peel. It's dry, it's bland. I would so much rather stuff like Lee Sin be meta. It's just, I think that makes for like a way more fun game. And I guess like the win rate only factors into that if it's like one piece of evidence that something needs to be changed.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's better when the high skill champions are the strongest ones because, you know, obviously you take skill to pilot them. Like you avoided making a lot of mistakes or you made like really good reads on what the opponent was going to do and you're able to punish.
Yeah.
So.
Isn't it also really interesting that like when they do changes, they talk about which tier now of like play. You know, it's like they have like something. It's probably like noob tier, whatever the fuck they call it. Then it's like skilled, and then at the very top it's like elite, and then pro play. And they have it like broken down between the different ranks because different stuff is broken or really underpowered depending on what skill level you're talking about. So I think all this stuff is actually that is even more evidence that win rate is just like so fucked to use as evidence for anything.
Yeah, and that was kind of like the main point I was starting with is just I don't like how much weight is put into win rate these days from Riot and the community perception of like what champs are good. Because you know that was one of the things that like I think Jat was the person who I don't think it was like him alone who introduced the system, but like he was the one who explained it when he was on the balance team. Is they were like, yo, we have this new sweet system we came up with where like we have these different groups of players we broke it down to, and then we have win rate in all these groups, and if they're ever like, you know, outside these margins, and I'm like, is that actually a real way to balance the game? Like that just sounds like you want to have your ass covered in the decisions you make by using numbers instead of like actually thinking about the game. So yeah, that was my main point.
Mm-hmm.